I'm going to begin with a question, and it's an extremely important question. It is not a rhetorical question, nor is it a trick question. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, though, depending on how you answer, it can be right or wrong for you. And the question is this: do you have enough faith? Do you have enough faith? It was this question that was posed in one of the cell group discussions last week. Do you feel like you have enough faith? Some of you will say, no, I don't have enough faith, but you're not quite sure what that even means and what it would mean to have enough faith. Others of you will say, I think I have enough faith, but you say that with a lack of confidence because you feel like, I don't know, I can always have more. You know, we began the series in the book of Romans, and it's been an in-depth, rich study so far. And these are the two things that we've learned so far from 1 through 3. First of all, the thing that we learned is that every person, every individual, you and me, your grandmother and your uncle and your neighbor and your child, we all are guilty, deserving of condemnation, and we all are incapable of saving ourselves. The second thing that we learned is this, that not on the basis of our righteousness, but on the basis of Christ's righteousness, that we can be justified, that's a technical word we learned last week, or made good enough through redemption, propitiation, and demonstration. Those are words we looked at last week as well. But in terms of how that is applied, because it was evident from last week's passage, not everyone is justified. But we got hints in verses 22, 25, and 26 that it is through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe that a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith of the one who has faith in Jesus. And so faith is the subject, and when the New Testament talks about believing and having faith, it comes from the same root word. And so apparently justification is something we gain through faith or by believing. We are made right enough or we are approved by God through having faith. But how much faith is enough, and what does it mean to have faith? Would you turn your Bibles with me to Romans chapter 3, verse 27. And we'll be looking at verses 27 through 31 today. And it was supposed to be part of last week's passage, but there was just so much to cover that we're going to cover this section today. Romans chapter 3, verses 27 through 31. In the ESV, we begin verse 27 this way: then what becomes of our boasting? It is excluded. By what kind of law? By a law of works? No, by a law of faith. It talks about two kinds of laws, the law of works and the law of faith. And I'm going to look at our passage today in two ways, the law of works and the law of faith. Paul implies that humanity defaults to a law of works. Both the religious and the irreligious operate this way. They believe in the principle of reward and punishment depending on life performance. When a person who's driving reckless on the freeway cuts you off and then gets pulled over, one of the things that we say is that person got karma. Karma is a Hindu, Buddhist kind of a philosophy, a law of works, in which a person gets what they deserve. And so if a person is born in a miserable situation, it's because they were bad in a previous life. And if people do well in this life, then in the next life, they'll be born into a good situation. We get what we deserve. Most people have some sort of a law of works philosophy. In verse 27, it says that if we have a law of faith, it excludes boasting. But if we have this law of works in which most people live by, we will have boasting. And I would say that if we live according to the law of works, we will either respond by boasting or by feeling like a failure. And let me describe it this way, that if we are someone who abide by the law of works, that we fall short and become failures, that workers can fall short and become failures. And that's my first sub point. Most honest people, if you think about it, and yourself as well, most honest people, regardless of a kind of a system that they have, whether it be religious or humanistic, most honest people feel like they fall short of the system or the standard that they own. And they walk around with a feeling of guilt or inadequacy. A couple of weeks ago, I was flipping through the channels and I stumbled upon a movie that was very popular a while ago. And I just caught the last end of it, but it's a movie called Saving Private Ryan. Do you remember? Right? It was a landmark movie. And I remember watching it a long time ago, and I was inspired, especially at the last scene. If you don't know the movie, by the way, you should go watch it. It's a great movie. But it's a story about, it begins with a mom who found out that she had lost 3 children, or she doesn't know, but this family who had 4 sons, 3 of them got killed in Normandy during World War II, and so the general feels like the 4th one, Private Ryan, needs to be brought home. And so they commission a captain, Captain Miller, played by Tom Hanks, to go find Private Ryan in Normandy, in Europe, in the midst of World War II, to find this particular individual and bring him back home to mom. And so the whole movie is about how they go and find this particular individual and battle against the enemy with the group of soldiers that they gather and eventually bring home. But along the way, if you remember the movie, many people die in order to not only find but to bring him home. The very last, one of the last scenes is they were trying to hold a bridge, and the Germans were coming with tanks, and Tom Hanks, Captain Miller, is all shot up, and he's sitting down completely defeated, and everyone's defeated. And I didn't remember the scene when I first watched it, but Private Ryan, if you remember, played by Matt Damon, right? It's like in a fetal position, crying in fear. This person that all these men are trying to save, and all these men who have given their lives, he's just cowering. Somehow they win the battle, and Tom Hanks, Captain Miller, gets a hold of Private Ryan, and Captain Miller, with his dying breath, takes a hold of Private Ryan and says, do you remember the words? Earn this. And the scenes were of fellow soldiers, friends who've given their lives so that Ryan can go back home to mom. Earn this. Earn it. I remember when I watched it, and a couple times in the past, I was inspired by that scene. It made me want to earn it. But it's strange, and I think perhaps because I'm older, that this time around when I watched that scene and Captain Miller takes a hold of his collar, earn this. I watched it and I had a completely different response. And the way that I felt about it is this. If a group of friends, one by one, died in order to save me so that I can go back to mom, And my friend took a hold of me, someone who was more courageous, more virtuous, took a hold of me in his dying breath and told me, Steve, earn this. I don't know how I would feel when I go home and I'm at Starbucks getting a latte grande. If I am sliding into my clean sheet at the end of the night, or if I'm playing with my kids or grandkids, I don't know how I would feel, but to feel like I haven't earned it. There would be, for me, a perpetual guilt and a sense of inadequacy. Because let's be honest. If a half a dozen of your friends or more had died so that you can go home to mommy, how could you possibly live up to that standard that was set for you? I would feel utterly incapable of earning what was set before me. And like I said, perhaps because I'm older, no matter what I've done in my life, I just don't feel like I've done enough to earn any of it. I would feel like a failure. You know, if you think about the kind of people that Jesus encounters in his lifetime, a group of people that he encounters are a bunch of failures. He encounters failures all the time. He encounters sinners, prostitutes, lepers, tax collectors, the poor. And in that particular culture, those who are unfortunate in their life circumstances because it was a theocracy, most of them felt like they were in that predicament because they're being cursed by God. They just were not good enough. God's favor was not on them. And in some ways, they feel like we're being punished for falling short. Even some of us, even when we walk around with great jobs and a good education, perhaps with a lot of friends, but internally we struggle with a sense of guilt and a sense of inadequacy, a sense of meaninglessness. If we operate out of the law of works, the problem is we'll fall short and feel like failures. But there are other people who will succeed in the standard that they've set up, and what they experience is they become boasters or they become arrogant. They become boasters. Jesus not only encountered those who fail at life, but Jesus encounters those who, in that particular culture, succeed in life. The Pharisees and the religious elites. They not only have power and riches, but religious approval, spiritual approval. And in some ways, they believe they are good enough. And when they look at other people, they feel like the other people are not good enough. They operate out of a law of works, and they themselves feel like they have succeeded, and they look at others, the immorals, the criminals, the homeless, the lazy, and feel like they are not good enough. You know how we know we operate out of a law of works is when we see people, others, and in our minds mentally, and most of us here are too polite to say it, that we think it. That I try hard, I studied hard, I live a good life, I serve well, but those other people. Like I said, you may not say it, but have you ever caught yourself saying this to your kids? If you don't study, if you hang around with bad friends, if you make wrong decisions, you might end up like them. As if you're saying that if we live a certain life, we would become more justified, that our lives are more worthwhile, we could be approved by God, but if not, you will be disapproved by God. The problem is that when we succeed, we oftentimes become boasters. In Philippians chapter 3, Paul gives a semi-biographical account of who he is. In verses 5 and 6, he talks about how he can have confidence in the flesh. Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. He says, hey, I am of the right ethnicity. I am of a good educational background, private education. Morally speaking, I live well. Religiously speaking, I've achieved as high a standing that I could potentially achieve, and I go above and beyond that. But what Paul says of himself, as he's looking at all of those achievements, all of those things that he had done, he says that they are rubbish. Verse 8, Philippians 3, and the Greek word is skubalon. It is translated in various translations as a refuse, dregs, or dung. And I don't know if you use the word dung, but in our modern vernacular, the word is, and we have catapult students here, so I won't say it, but it is the word SHI, tomorrow, He looks at all of his achievement, and it's like skubalon. It's a pile of skubalon. We try so hard to justify our existence, and if we just live a certain way, that we will be justified. I don't know if you ever really actively think about it, but when we die and we were to stand before God's judgment, He's not going to ask you for your GPA. What was your ranking in high school? What was the best college you went to? What is your income? What kind of car did you drive? What kind of shoe did you wear? How many Facebook friends did you have? Did you have more followers than you followed on Instagram? Whatever else becomes street cred nowadays. I don't know. But we live a whole life, and we try to get our kids to live a certain life as to communicate that that's what you can trust in, that's what justifies, but none of those things justify, does it? Don't you find it strange that we spend so much of our existence working so hard at things that ultimately don't justify us? And there are times when there's a blessing, we take credit for things that we have nothing to do with. As you know, I had a series of heart procedures done. And it was a set of stents that they put in, and a stent. I still kind of marvel at the medical technology. They would they would punch a hole in my wrist, take a thin little instrument, like a fishing line that has a camera and a light. Attached to it is it's like a fish, like a metallic net-like thing, and they somehow inserted it into my wrist. And a doctor with this machine, somehow he guides that all the way into somehow my heart, and goes into the place where it was like blocked. And they first go in with a balloon to open it up, and then go back with the little metallic net thing, and then permanently install the stent there, and they come out. That's amazing. I have to ask someone what that's called. But apparently, my third set of stent was technically perhaps the most difficult, in that I had some stents already put in, but my heart still wasn't all that happy, and so they went back in. And in places that already I had stents in, my left ascending, they went through the stent, beyond it, to put in more stents. I mean, it's just fantastic. You know, of all the things that I've done in my lifetime, the most life-saving, technically difficult thing that's ever happened in my life was probably that. I'm thinking so. But you realize that I never boast about it. Hey, what did you think about my stents? That was cool what I did, huh? Right? Because if you think about it, during that procedure, I did absolutely nothing. They sedated me. I was, they put gas on me, and I was lucid. I was trying really hard to figure out what was going on. I wish I could watch. I would have. I couldn't move. In fact, they restrained me so that I couldn't move my wrist. Listen, the only thing that I did, the only thing that I was responsible for is to say to my cardiologist, I trust you. I trust you to poke a long, thin, metallic instrument through my wrist into my heart. And somehow, I don't quite understand all of it, somehow that's going to save my life. The most life-changing thing that's ever happened to me wasn't done by me, but it was done by someone else to me. How can I boast? It is strange how we boast about things that don't really ultimately justify. But things that justify, we forget. Tim Keller said, we only exclude boasting when we realize that our best achievements have nothing to justify us. Let's talk about the law of trust, the law of faith, the law of faith. If there is a law of works that most people abide by, what Paul is trying to argue is that there is a law of faith. And there's two components to the law of faith. The first is that believers, or those who live according to the law of faith, do not trust in their own work. Believers do not trust in their own work. In other words, believers know that the law of works does not work. Believers understand that the law of works does not work. You know, of all the good things that a Jewish Christian could do, of all the acts of kindness, of love, obedience, if there was a justifying particular, a singular act, a Jew would say it would be circumcision. A Jewish Christian may say, well, you're saved kind of by faith, but no, you still need to be circumcised. So a Jewish Christian would somehow say it is faith and works. And that piece of work that they would oftentimes point to, maybe subconsciously, is that of circumcision. But Paul is making an argument in verses 29 and 30, and I think this is a brilliant argument. Or is God the God of Jews only? Is he not the God of Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also, since God is one. He's saying, are Jews and Gentiles both Christians? Can they be saved? And the Roman Christians agreed, yes. And then he asks the question, because of the Jewish Christians who believe that, we're saved by faith, but circumcision, that really adds to our salvation, that really secures our salvation. But he's asking, are Gentiles, the uncircumcised, are they saved also? Verse 30, since God is one who will justify the circumcised by faith and uncircumcised through faith. If both the circumcised and uncircumcised are saved, and they're saved through faith, what is it that they have in common? What is it that is the minimum thing that they have? It's not circumcision, but it is faith. In fact, If one has no circumcision, then a circumcision is not a prerequisite or a requisite for salvation, is it not? The most religious activity, the good thing, the best thing that someone can do religiously or in terms of morally, if we can say that that doesn't save, then what we can say is really faith is what saves. Now, let me clarify what faith is not, okay? Faith is not, to begin with, an intellectual agreement. It is not simply the ability to take a theology test and ace it. It is not an emotional feeling toward Jesus. I remember a friend of mine used to say that oftentimes when we sing praise songs, it is like saying, Jesus is my boyfriend. We get the warm and fuzzies. It is not a sincerity. It is not like if I'm just sincere, that is faith. It is not effort, like if I could just have more faith. In James chapter 2, verse 19, James says, you believe that God is one, you do well. If you say you have great theology, you're monotheistic, that's great. But he adds, even the demons believe and shudder. Proper theology is not what saves us. No matter how hard we try, even in faithing, no matter how sincere we are, no matter how intellectually connected we are, that those things don't save us no matter how hard we try. Once in a while people would ask me, what are you? And I say, well, I'm from Korea. I was born in Korea. And they would ask me, are you from South Korea or North Korea, right? And, well, I'm from South Korea. I was born there, etc. But if they would have asked my parents, are you from South Korea or North Korea, they can technically say that they're from North Korea because both my sets of parents were born in North Korea, born and raised. They fled the North Korea area during the Korean War, and they fled. And we had family up north. In fact, my father's brothers, he had several brothers. Some of them fought actually for the north, and others fought for the south. It was a fascinating family division. It was literally a civil war in that way, a family war. If someone were to ask me, what is the one country that you would want to visit that you haven't? It'd be North Korea. It'd be the country of my parents. If I really wanted to, I can go to the edge of Santa Monica, maybe the Santa Monica Pier, which jets out further out. I can stand at the edge of the Santa Monica Pier. I can look at my Google map with a compass and figure out from there, as I go to the edge of Santa Monica Pier as much as possible, and figure out, okay, North Korea is over there. Let's say, so intellectually, I know where North Korea is. And I think to myself, I really want to go there, and I'm really sincere. I want to visit the country of my parents. I want to go there. And let's say I try really hard, so I get a pair of new Nikes. I get, like good running training shorts and shirt, and I get on the treadmill on a daily basis and I work out. Let's say I read books and watch instructional videos on how to improve my jump. And so after making all the effort with sincerity, I take a running start, and I jump off the Santa Monica Pier toward North Korea, and maybe if I've really trained well, I get maybe 10, 15 feet out, and you know what would happen? I would land in the Pacific Ocean and probably drown, right? No amount of effort, good intentions, sincerity, desires, emotional desire would allow me to do the impossible. Romans 3:23 said, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." When the rich young ruler said, "What must I do to be saved?" Jesus ultimately said, it's like a camel going through the eye of a needle. It is impossible for you to achieve, even to try to have enough faith in order to be good enough. You can never justify yourself. Having saving faith means, first of all, understanding that there's nothing I can do, not even believing enough that I can save myself. So if you answer the question that I began with, do you have enough faith? If the answer was, no, I don't have enough faith, partially you're right, you don't have enough faith. But what does it mean to believe then? Believers trust not in their own work, but believers trust in the work of Christ. Believers trust in the work of Christ. We looked at verses 22, 25, and 26 before, and let me look at it again. It is through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe, a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith, of the one who has faith in Jesus. Faith has an object. Belief has an object. It is not simply believing in myself or just a generic, I just want to believe, but believing in someone. The Protestant reformers believe that saving faith has three essential elements: notitia, a sensus, and fiducia. Basically, it means knowledge, conviction, and trust. Knowledge or acceptance and trust. That we need to have a knowledge of basically who we are as sinners and who Jesus Christ is. We can't simply believe that Jesus was a good teacher, a prophet, an example, but he's the Son of God who gave his life as a propitiation and atonement for us. We need to be able to accept that, have conviction about that it's really true that Jesus is who he really is. Not only know it, but hold on to it. And then we need to have trust in it. That we believe that the death of Jesus is what can justify me, and to put my faith there, it is to lean into that. Romans 10:9 and 10, if you have not accepted Jesus, or if someone you know wants to be saved and you're not quite sure what verse to point to, Romans 10:9, 10, 10:9, 10, okay? If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. There is a juxtaposition of what we believe, what we hold, and in a volition of what we confess. A knowledge and acceptance and a trust. One night, a house caught on fire. The little boy climbed up onto the roof of his house to try to escape the flame. The father stood on the ground, and there was smoke and flames behind the boy. And the father cried out to his son, "Jump, I'll catch you." He knew the boy had to jump to save his life but unfortunately, all that the boy can see is just smoke. He couldn't see his father, he just heard his voice. The father kept yelling at him, "Jump, I will catch you." The boy protested, "Daddy, I cannot see you." To which the father replied back, "But I can see you, and that's all that matters." Faith is oftentimes not understanding fully, but accepting and putting our trust that it is not on the basis of what we've done, but what Christ has done for us. You know, that it still beckons the question, do I have enough faith? Yes, we are told that it is not on the basis of what I do and how much I believe, but putting my trust in Jesus Christ. But how do I know if I have enough faith in Jesus Christ? And you know, it is interesting what Jesus says of faith. In Matthew chapter 17, verse 20, he says, "You of little faith, For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, and what Jesus does is he takes in that particular culture the smallest microscopic thing that they can relate to. So in our culture, if he's saying it, if you have faith as small as an electron or a I don't know what's smaller than an electron now. There's some of you can tell me afterwards, right? If you have even an ounce of faith, you can say to this mountain, move, and it will move. And what Jesus is saying, it's not your faith, but whom you have faith in. Little kids were coming in Matthew 19, verse 14. He says, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for such belongs to the kingdom of heaven. What is it that the children have now? Do they have greater knowledge? Do they have more work? Do they desire it more? A father with a sick child is saying, can you help me? And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible for one who believes. And immediately the father in Matthew 9:24 says, the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. My faith is so inadequate, would you help me in my unbelief? Do you understand what Jesus is saying? When he's encountering people who believe that they can operate out of the law of works, they can be good enough, he says, no, it's impossible. You will never achieve it. But for those who are seeking desperately, understanding that they are not good enough, he says, no, if you believe as small as a mustard seed, if you're like a little child, even in your unbelief, you say, help me. That's good enough. You can put your trust in me. And let me just fill out the Roman numeral C for those of you who are taking notes. Believers trust and become worshipers. Believers trust and become worshipers. If we abide in the law of works, we'll either become failures or boasters. But if we really believe, then it is not on our basis. It is not even the degree of faith that I have, but the object of faith, the person that we have faith in. Then we'll end up becoming worshipers. Now that we began with the question of, do you have enough faith? Do you have enough faith? And I think the better question is this, not do you have enough faith, but whom do you have faith in? Whom do you have faith in? If your faith is in yourself, no, you don't have enough. Because you are incapable of saving yourself. The best of you cannot save. But if your faith is in Jesus, even the mustard seed size faith God will use. And that it is He whom we will lean on. I'm going to ask the elders and the band to come up at this time. And I believe that even as Christians, we are constantly tempted. Even at the moment of salvation, we believe and that we are saved only on the basis of grace, only on the basis of faith, that we are tempted still to operate by, have an attitude of those who operate with the law of works. So some 2,000 years ago when he sat with a group of disciples, and I think this is so appropriate because he knew that they will all fall short. They will feel like failures. And he passed the bread and he passed the cup, not on the basis of what you have done, what you will do, but what has been done for you. I want you to trust in that and remember that. And so